importance of it. But I want to really emphasize in terms of in discussing what it takes to build a healthy team, because it's one thing, and you kind of like set the tone right there a moment. It's one thing to build a team, like adding more people, but it's another thing to making that a healthy team, and kind of what does that look like? So. The question I'm curious about is, like, the idea of building of team building in itself, sounds great, right? But it can also take a lot of work, probably, to some extent. So
Yeah.
what are some good ways you think to approach this so it doesn't become overwhelming? Because I'm sure that can happen too.
Um, I feel like setting sort of I feel like there's two aspects to this team building thing, which is like one part of it is the hiring process. So things that you do before you even have someone new confirmed on the team.
Hmm.
And the other part is like once they're actually on the team. So the first like week or 2 weeks, and then after that as well. So for me, hiring was the most crucial part. I really looked for whether I liked the tone of the people and whether like I got along with them ahead of time already, and especially during the interviews. I mostly like I asked the standard questions and then like checked out their background and all of that stuff, and made sure that they were comfortable with everything from my side as well. But mostly I looked for whether I got along with them, and then if that checked out, that was already like a very good sign that things were going to work out in the future. So for a small team like this, I think it's very important that your social dynamics fit from the get go, because otherwise
Mm,
you're just going to grind the gears there and it's just not going to be a good time.
yeah.
Um,
No.
yeah. And the other thing is sorry, go ahead.
No. No. Keep going, please.
Okay. The other thing is like the first few weeks, I think are very important, where you should
Right.
definitely like make sure they know how things go and like are that you're available if they have any questions, or like they don't know what to do, or if they get lost or whatever. So having extra time allotted for that is good. And then once they're properly integrated, just like every couple of months, make sure that they have a way to voice their complaints, because I feel like oftentimes there's this kind of pressure there to sort of not really talk about what you find problematic or difficult to deal with, and so people just kind of suppress it. So specifically going out of your way of asking like, hey, is there anything else I can do for you? Is there anything that's troubling you? Like, is there anything I can do better to manage the team? So I think that's like important to keep that kind of communication going on, because otherwise it's just gonna sicker through the cracks and then sort of accumulate over time.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right there, because if that does accumulate and build up and everything else, then it could be one of those things where, like, especially you and your role as a leader, as a director, can kind of be like blindsided by something. Like it boils up, and then someone says something like, "Oh," and like you said, if you're not regularly checking in on those things, I think one, it shows empathy, and that you care for your team. But at the other time, it's a great way to avoid potential, pitfalls or problems that could arise. That like could be out of the blue, and then it's like it's never fun dealing with that type of stuff when they happen, if even
Yeah,
if they
yeah.
happen. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like this is like I guess my first team that I'm building for a commercial project myself, but
Mhm.
I had a lot of experience in university leading teams, and I made a lot of mistakes there. So I got things out of the way, I suppose.
Yeah. No, and like, and that, I think that's important too, to have that understanding and that experience too, and taking that so you can kind of move forward and apply it here. The other thing I wanted to call out too, going back for a second, is like, really looking for those right candidates. So, because I think at face value, everybody just, like you said, they check off the boxes. Oh, they can do this, this, and this. Great. They have a good background. Awesome. But it's like, how do they really jive with you socially, or essentially the culture of what you guys have established, the work culture, and probably another thing too, and I'm sure this is also something that you're looking for too, is just like the ability to be open-minded about things, to look at things from different perspectives, and also come forward with like solutions too, because and again, I think like having those types of open communications, like you mentioned too, after they're become part of the team, and having those conversations that like really promotes, I think, that mind of thinking, and allowing them to be open about those things. Or if they're voicing complaints, it's not like they're complaining. They might see something like, oh, well, I noticed that you guys do things this way, and I was thinking perhaps we could do it this way, and it could reduce the time, productivity time, and we could be more effective in this area. So it's just really funny how like those two things, how you bucketed them, can really play into each other very well, moving forward and benefiting the team. So I love that you called those things out.
Yeah, thanks. I think one of the things also that's like people are becoming more mindful of nowadays is just also team diversity, like just having people from different backgrounds and with different experiences in their life is really adds value to it. But another thing I find important is, at least for like small teams, I understand for like bigger teams this is not really feasible, but the way we handle things is that all of the documentation and information that we gather around the project is public to everyone. So even like our composer can look into like the code if he wants to, or he could check out our documentation on the writing and give feedback on that, so that like everyone feels welcome and like part of the project, and that they can influence it in some way, and it doesn't just feel like, oh, I'm only doing this, so I better like just forget about everything else.
Yeah, I think that is really important. And to your point, like you don't necessarily see this in like bigger company aspects. Like for example, I come from a marketing agency background, and a lot of times like you have your different departments, and this can be applied anywhere, right? You have your different departments, and you're basically, to an extent, depending on your role, siloed within those departments. And then from there, it like you can. And there could be a big project that's going on, but you don't necessarily know what else is going on in the other areas. And because of that, you could potentially feel removed from the overall project, even though, yes, you are a team member of that project and you're contributing to it. You by being siloed in everything else, it could feel like you're not necessarily a part of it. And that could still probably easily carry over to even small projects. So I love that you keep those things open and transparent. So it's like, hey, look, we know this is your job. We're not asking you to do all these other things. We're just saying if you're curious, you want to know more, you want to be involved, or to whatever extent that's reasonable, it's open. You have the means to do that. Like the example you said, like even the composer could check out the code if they want to. Why not? Right? So I absolutely love that, because again, it's really a way of being more inclusive with your team, and really showing, instead of telling them, that they are a part of this whole entire project, not just their contribution.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I appreciate that like the difficulties in teams where you have actual departments and stuff are difficult, because then you get into sort of a communication and information overflow if
Yes.
like too many people suggest things from all over the place. But I feel like that's what you have managers for at that point. Like those people are there to basically handle that, and they should figure it out.
Yeah, no, agreed. Like, because with anything, the dynamics can like really change depending on size and everything else, of course. But still, I think what typically happens, and what it sounds like you're very aware of, is we can all get super caught up in the work that we're doing, and by doing that and by being so focused there, we generally, as people, as human beings, we'll forget about, hey, there's more to this than just what I'm doing. And I think that's what that is essentially promoting. And on a small team, I think it's really helpful, because I think there's a lot more that can come out of that, from like performance and everything else wise, than just being so dug down in your own work,
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, I get that problem as well, where I'm focused on like solving some kind of programming problem, and then I don't check what other people are doing in my team all the time, and then it's like, oh shit, now I should need to back up and like go back to that and make sure everything's going smoothly. So it's definitely not something I'm immune to at all.
Yeah, definitely. So I was also curious too, because earlier you mentioned about having a vision, and essentially the vision can relate to goals and such. So I was curious. Sometimes it can be a challenge to get a team on the same page, and then share that same vision. And while this might be easier for a smaller team, I still think those problems can persist. So, what are some good ways to help ensure that everyone is working towards the same goal?
That's a tough one because in one way I feel sort of conflicted whether that's even possible at all to get everyone to the same goal, because everyone has their own like ideas of what the project is supposed to be and what the important parts are. So I feel like it's more important to let people focus on the areas that they can express themselves in. So, for instance, let's say you have an artist and they really like drawing like technical computery things, like machines and whatever. So I feel like it's more important to just let them have their way with that, like not be as controlling over how things should look there, or like sort of ease up on the directing there to let them really floater things there. Or if you have like a writer that's really good on dialogue, just let them do that and just sort of provide hints instead of rigorous direction.
Nope.
I think if you let people just do what they like best, then that's gonna keep them engaged enough to really want to see the entire project go smoothly as well.
Yeah, I like how you approach that too, because I got this idea of this question from I think just a lot of like business books that I read and things, right? But I love your
Right.
approach, especially because of like thinking that small team mentality. So and it's a good way, a very good way to approach it, because I think how some people could approach this is simply, this is my vision, this is what I want, and then become very almost dictatorial potentially. And not to say that
Oh yeah.
that people are like that, but it is possible. And sometimes even if that's not your intention, it could easily come off that way. So it's one thing to have that vision, but then, I mean, you hired these team members for a reason. You went through a process. You're making sure that they're involved in everything else, and then it's good to just kind of let them really bring their skill and talent to that, by still within the means that have been defined for them to do their job, but not being like really controlling in that aspect. And you should, based off of everything else you shared, you should, in theory at least, or in, I would say, in practice too, depending on how really good you are with like management skills and stuff, already have this established. So it comes to a point where it's like, all right, you're here for a reason. We trust you. We believe in you. Now, do the thing that you do so well.
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely a thing where you get sort of very attached to your ideas of what you wanted to have, which is like, it's very dangerous because ideas in your head are always more fleshed out than they really are. Like you think
yeah.
you know what you want, but it's not really there. So like I know it all too well where different team members had like a different interpretation. It wasn't exactly what I wanted, and I really need to like force myself to sit back down and say, okay, look, listen, these people, I hired them because I trust them, so I'm just gonna ease back on this, and unless I have like heavy objections that I can back up with something, I'm just gonna let them do their thing, because I probably don't know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, and I think kind of what you're saying here too. It's a dynamic thing too. I mean, you want to give that freedom and everything else, but you also want to like keep things in line too. And it's not always going to be present at that very moment of like the hiring day, right?
Yeah, for sure.
So I think a lot of those things can help make that process easier, though, because there's nothing worse than like butting heads about stuff. So, and I
Oh
think,
God.
and